The TikTok battle may be just beginning. A major European cloud company makes its simplified cooling system open source. Microsoft Xbox sales continue to tank. Meta gets hammered by the European Union for not tackling Russian disinformation, and the sheer scale of disinformation and misinformation may blow your mind. All this and more on the Truth or Consequences edition of #Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. The battle over TikTok's future in the United States is far from over, despite Congress passing a law that could effectively ban the popular video app unless its Chinese owners divest their stake. TikTok is vowing to wage a court fight while also potentially facing hurdles from Beijing over selling its core technology. After failing to stop the legislation targeting TikTok, its parent company ByteDance is gearing up for a legal challenge, likely centered on claims that the law violates its First Amendment rights and those of its 170 million U.S. users. However, convincing courts to overturn the law on constitutional grounds could prove to be an uphill battle, as judges often defer to Congress on national security matters. Many anticipate TikTok's First Amendment arguments will face skepticism, especially since lawmakers say classified briefings revealed concerning intelligence. If TikTok's legal challenge fails, ByteDance may be forced to consider selling the app to avoid an outright U.S. ban after a divestment deadline set for next year. But even a sale could face a major roadblock from the Chinese government. Under Beijing's export controls, ByteDance would likely need approval to sell TikTok's recommendation algorithm, the technology that keeps users hooked by curating an infinite feed of videos. Without it, any sale would be far less valuable. Experts suggest China may block such a lucrative asset transfer to prevent ByteDance's homegrown success story from falling into U.S. hands, even if the company's founders stand to profit immensely. There are also fears that if Beijing does block a deal, it could prompt retaliation from Washington against U.S. companies with major operations in China like Apple and Tesla, escalating tensions into a broader tech Cold War. The saga is far from over, and TikTok's fate may lie in a prolonged battle that could go on for years. In a move aimed at boosting sustainability in the data center industry, French cloud computing company OVH Cloud has open-sourced the designs for two key components of its liquid cooling systems. The firm says making these tools publicly available can help operators improve energy and water efficiency as they scale up to meet soaring demand. OVH Cloud unveiled the technical specifications and schematics for its manual control valve and 3-balls flow meter at this week's Open Compute Project Summit in Lisbon. The cloud provider claims these proprietary cooling innovations offer simpler, more cost-effective alternatives to traditional systems. The manual control valve uses a standard valve design to regulate hydraulic circuits, avoiding the need for complex shutoff valves and filters required by automatic systems. OVH Cloud said this analog approach is cheaper, more reliable, and easier to maintain. Meanwhile, a new design for a flow meter uses the varying sizes of 3 balls in a tube to generate flow resistance, providing a simple yet precise way to measure water levels. The design relies on basic push-fitting connectors rather than sophisticated metering equipment. By open-sourcing these components, OVH Cloud aims to help data center operators reduce capital and operating costs as they deploy liquid cooling to support energy-intensive workloads like AI while meeting sustainability targets. The cloud firm argues its simplified, maintenance-free designs can lower both energy and water usage compared to traditional cooling setups. It frames the open sourcing as boosting global efforts to make data centers more environmentally friendly amid power shortages. Analysts say innovative approaches to liquid cooling will be crucial as the industry scales up to handle a surge in AI computing in an eco-friendly manner. OVH Cloud said it's also working on open firmware to improve data center server security and lifecycle management. Xbox sales have dropped for the second year in a row, this year by 30%, largely due to lower volume of consoles sold during the start of 2024. And if that sounds familiar, it's because Xbox hardware revenue decreased 30% last year as well. A number of key titles for the Xbox have jumped ship and gone to PlayStation 5. In fact, Satya Nadella bragged about having more games in the top 25 bestsellers on PS5 than any other publisher. "We are committed to meeting players where they are by bringing great games to more people on more devices," he said. Given that Microsoft bought gaming company Activision Blizzard for $68 billion less than 2 years ago, it's a good thing that at least Microsoft games are popular. But Microsoft is claiming they haven't given up on the Xbox, and they have a major new development for their game console that will be the biggest technical leap in their hardware history. And if you're once again thinking, haven't we heard that before? You cynic, you. Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, is set to face a formal investigation by European Union regulators as soon as Monday. The probe stems from concerns that Meta is not doing enough to counter disinformation efforts, particularly from Russia, that could undermine the integrity of upcoming EU elections. According to two sources, the European Commission will announce the investigation focused on whether Meta's content moderation practices sufficiently limit the spread of political advertising and foreign disinformation campaigns across its platforms. Regulators suspect Meta's systems are failing to properly identify and restrict the dissemination of false or manipulative political content, including efforts by Russia to sow discord ahead of European-wide elections in early June. The probe will assess if Facebook and Instagram's ad targeting mechanisms for political content comply with the EU's new Digital Services Act. This landmark law requires tech platforms to disclose their policies for tackling misinformation and propaganda. Investigators plan to examine whether Meta has fallen short in mitigating risks related to its planned shutdown of the CrowdTangle tool for monitoring viral content. Concerns around Meta's data sharing with fact-checkers and journalists will also reportedly be scrutinized. If violations are found, Meta could face fines as high as 6% of its global annual revenue under the Digital Services Act's enforcement provisions. The investigation comes amid growing fears among EU countries over Russia exploiting social media to spread disinformation aimed at undermining democracy and electoral integrity across the bloc. In a statement, Meta said it has well-established processes for identifying and mitigating risks and looks forward to cooperating with the Commission's probe. Now, we got this report in last week, and the scope and scale of it knocked us for a loop. There is a staggering scale of disinformation being spread across major social media platforms each day, at least according to a report from a company called IDCrypt Global, who estimated that 1.5 billion fake news posts are created or shared daily by disinformation actors active on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok. The firm analyzed data from the recent Code of Disinformation report done in Europe across 3 countries, Spain, Slovakia, and Poland. The report was supported by a consortium of all major social media networks, although it appears that X pulled out of the group partway through. For Crypt Global's findings, you have to assume that the ratios in this 3-country sample report can be generalized across the entirety of social media. But if that's true, it means there are over 516 million users classified as disinformation actors across the 6 leading platforms, accounting for 5% of their total 10.5 billion user base. On average, each of these actors creates or shares 3.9 pieces of disinformation content per day, resulting in an eye-opening 1.5 billion daily fake news posts. Again, assuming that you can generalize the findings from the 3 countries surveyed, Facebook would be the largest source with an estimated 1 billion of these misleading posts created on the site alone every single day by actors making up 7.8% of its user base. Twitter, or X as it's now called, had the highest proportion of disinformation actors at 8.7% of all users, translating to over 205 million fake posts spread on that platform daily, perhaps explaining why X pulled out of this group. But most surprisingly, LinkedIn was identified as hosting the most rampant disinformation actors, with each one creating or sharing 6.6 posts per day on average for a total of 97 million daily disinformation posts on the professional networking site. In contrast, YouTube had the smallest percentage of disinformation actors at just 0.8% of its user base, resulting in a relatively lower 78 million fake news posts being spread there daily. The analysts note limited data was available on the extent of the issues on TikTok due to it being a Chinese company. It would be very interesting to see this study repeated in North America to see if those percentages really do hold true, and getting some transparency on TikTok would also be useful, given how many people claim to be getting their news from social media in general, and for more and more younger people, TikTok in particular. Democracy dies in darkness is the motto of the Washington Post. But a more appropriate phrase might be, democracy also dies in disinformation. Just a thought. Love to hear more from you on this topic, and if anybody knows of any other research in this area, please do let us know. And that's our show. One final appeal to our audience. I actually got approached by someone to say, do you know any women who are in leadership roles in AI? And I think I know a couple, but I really drew a blank. So if you have any suggestions out there, please send them to me. Hashtag Trending goes to air 5 days a week with a weekend interview show, and we're also on YouTube now. If you catch us there, please give us a like or a subscribe. The numbers are building, and you're helping us build that audience. Find us at our new home at technewsday.ca or .com, you pick. And you can reach me with comments, suggestions, or even criticism at editorial@technewsday.ca. Our redesign should happen this week, but for now, you can find us in the top stories each day if you want to get the show notes. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a terrific Tuesday.